Good afternoon, sir.
Yes. Madam, should we start or just wait for another 2, 3 minutes for others to join?
Yes, sir.
Okay, maybe 2, 3 minutes for others to join. Okay. Okay, dear friends, let us start because it is already time. Let others join in due course. I think I welcome you all. I think we have to recapitulate what we discussed yesterday. If you remember, yesterday we discussed about how to make a research design, how to select a problem, how to define a problem, then how to set hypothesis, do the hypothesis testing, and collect data. And that data would go for interpretation and then writing of reports. But today we shall discuss something. If it is ethnographic research and social science research, then what are the different kinds of data collection techniques? tools and techniques are there in social science, especially in anthropology. So, and specifically, we'll be discussing on four issues. One, what is primary data? Second, what is secondary data? Third, what is biological method? And fourth, archaeological method. Because if you can recall, what we discussed is anthropology is a study of human beings and his society, and it tries to understand all different kinds of social phenomena from a holistic point of view, from in its totality, from all different kinds of perspectives that are possible to look at. And since human societies and human behaviors are very, very complex to understand, so that is why there are number of research tools and techniques one need to master in order to understand this complex social phenomena that deals with humans. So since you need to have very different kinds of approach, research approach and scientific method. So, because human conditions can be very different. For example, if you want to focus on tribal societies or simple societies or agrarian societies, it will be very different from urban or industrial society. The people's relationship, for example, or the social institutions that binds people together are very different. So that is why you need to have different sets of data in order to understand. And if you want to understand whether individual behavior or group behavior, that would also require very different sets of data. So that is why it is very important to understand what are different kinds of techniques available with anthropology. As you know, anthropology is a holistic studies, mainly the fieldwork tradition started by Bronislaw Manilowski, who studied the Trobriand Islanders, and he stayed there with the people in order to understand them. So then, if you stay there and try to understand people's behavior, what would be essential? The essential component would be to understand their language, the verbal language that they use. And sometimes, if the community is unknown to you, apart from the verbal language, you also have symbols used by people, members of a community, that as an alien or as an outsider or a stranger, it will be difficult for you to decipher that, to understand what exactly they are communicating. Until unless you become part of them, understand and part of their cultural group, it will be very difficult for you to understand what exactly they are communicating. They're- So, it will be very, very essential as a researcher to understand and to master all those art that to decipher to decipher what people really communicate, and then the language that they use. So we will also discuss all these things in different kinds of situations. What kind of tool is good? And if you remember the example that I had given you, I would like to again repeat and give that example of cultivating with different kinds of tools. And you have these three patches of land. You have a kitchen garden, then you have a bigger, like fourth kitchen garden is only 2,000 square feet area. Then you have another land which is 10,000 square feet, and another big area which is 10 acres. Then for these three kinds of land, if you want to cultivate vegetables, then you have to use, as I said, different tools. For the bigger patch of land, tractor, then plow, and then the kodar. So These three things you have to use because that is the necessary. Because for your kitchen garden, you cannot just use the tractor because that is not suitable. But the area is very small. It will be expensive, it will be inconvenient. Similarly, in all different kinds of situations, you need to understand, you need to be intelligent enough to use a specific tool that is at your hand. And if it is, and as you know, there are also different methods of study. One is qualitative, second is quantitative, and then you also have mixed method. And normally in social science, in anthropology, especially in social anthropology, qualitative research method is usually used. In physical anthropology, both mixed method, quantitative and qualitative is used, but it is not exclusive that people use only one method. People can always, depending on research question, they can select the method. So now let us come to the important method of data collection or techniques of data collection. That one is your observation. So observation is one of the earliest method of data collection in anthropology, and it is largely employed by social anthropologists or sociologists or social scientists, often in larger number for survey and other techniques. Because if you compare other techniques that people use, I'm interchangeably using tools and techniques, but they are quite different. But here, for your understanding, observation is actually is a tool. It can also become a technique also. So observation is widely used. Observation, what it means? It means observation is to see and to visualize, to vision, to see, to find something. And what you do when you are in the midst of a strange society or a community, you it is difficult for you to interact with people immediately with a schedule or with sending a questionnaire or asking for focus group discussion. What you do, you start observing people, looking at people, trying to make sense of what they really interact, the kind of symbols that they use, the language they use, the body language they perform, all those things, so that so you try to observe them. But then observation becomes an important research technique in social science. But then what to observe, how to observe, and whether all kinds of vision, observation, looking at things, understanding through looking, are they observation or it is something special? I think there are something called naive and scientific observation. So naive observation refers to like everyday unstructured observation, which people use when they interact with others in social situations. And observation becomes scientific when it is systematically planned and executed, when it is related to a certain goal, and when it is subjected to test and control. It is not just that you are observing people, but you are also applying a particular plan and executing it. And you also are also testing and controlling what exactly you want to see. And then observation can be participant and can be non-participant observation also. Participant observation is like you become, if you want to study, for example, if you want to study the Santal tribal community of Odisha, then, and suppose you go visit a village in Mayurbhanj district and you go and participate. Participant observation means you go and participate in all the daily activities that they do and observe all the rituals, functions, and the social institutions that make them to function. So you need to become part of them. If they go to jungle for hunting, you go with them. If they go to agricultural land, you also go with them. You see what exactly they are doing. And then you become part of them. You become a Santali. But the problem is, many people are very critical of this particular research technique. They say once you become part of them, then you lose the objectivity becomes that is the hallmark of a researcher. A researcher, while applying a scientific method to gather data, need to maintain objectivity, be free from all kinds of bias. But if you stay in a village with a studied community, you become part of them, and then you may lose that objectivity. So participant observation may have this kind of problem with this. But then the other is non participant observation. That means you are there, you observe people, see and interact with them, and experience what people do, just like what Malinowski did with Trobriand Islanders, or what Verrier Elvin did with Murias of Bastar, or S.C. Roy, the father of Indian ethnography, who conducted fieldwork among the tribal communities of Chotnagpur and Odisha. He worked on the Mundas, the Orangs, Birhors, Khadiyas, Bhuyas. So they worked on them, and they also applied this participant and non-participant observation method for data collection. And a method is thought to be qualitative if it shows, among other things, at least some of the characteristics, like a commitment to study everyday life events, which are studied the way they are experienced and understood by the participants. So the researcher should be committed to study the everyday life events. It is not that, like other survey kind of method, what many other social scientists do, you go interact with people, come back. Suppose if you have gone to interview somebody, you just spend half an hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, interact with them, you have specific question, then you come back. But in observation, you need to be very, very committed to study the everyday life events. It is a lot of time consuming, because entire day you may have to spend with people in order to understand them, in order to understand all the complicated relationship, complicated language or symbols that they use with each other. And only once you become part of them, you become one of them, you have a longer stay, only you can apply this participant observation method. Then the perception of reality as constructed through interactions and communication of the participant. So your perception of reality as constructed by them, by the people, you need to develop that kind of tendency, that kind of temperament with you. And the performance of the study in the natural environment of the participant without changing it in any way. For example, if you compare with the interview, one can do interview by, suppose you can dissociate the member. Suppose if you have gone to the Santal village, if you want to study, for example, a person called Govind Santal. Suppose if you want to study him, or Govind Murmu, but you can invite Govind Murmu to another village or another setup, you can invite him to Bhubaneswar and take an interview in Bhubaneswar. But observation, you cannot do that. Observation is something that needs to be done only in the natural setting. Govind Murmu needs to be studied in the natural setting of the village where Govind lives. So, observation is something that usually is done in its natural environment with the participants without changing it in any way. And then you also have something called open and hidden observation. So the distinction refers to degree to which the identity of the researcher as an observer, as well as the purpose of the study, is known to the participant. The participants know the purpose of the study. you are a researcher, you want to study a Santali village, Santal people of that village know that you are applying observation as a technique, you are looking at them, you are trying to understand them, and this is what is your objective. For example, if you are using observation as a technique to understand the marriage rituals, so you be present in that marriage ritual or in the marriage procession. You behave as if you are a member of the Santal community and they also accept you as such. And there is a mutual understanding and trust that even if you are a stranger, you are as an outsider, you are a researcher, you do not belong to them, but they would consider you as somebody from their community. So it is known to them. But hidden observation is something you do not reveal your objective. You observe people. That is done especially with topics that the respondents or the community members or the studied individuals do not want to reveal. There are many sensitive issues. For example, issues relating to Knoxilism or to addiction or to suicide or something which has a lot of stigma attached to it. Suppose a particular disease profile like leprosy, tuberculosis, people do not want to reveal. So, in those conditions, or typical sensitive related issues, so people would not open up, they would not allow you. So, what you can do is you can study them by applying hidden observation as a method. Observation here doesn't mean just looking at things. Be present there. Also, applying a scientific approach to what you see. And then you have direct and indirect observation. And direct observation studies the subject. It intends to explain. For example, if the study intends to explain the patterns of conflict in marital dads and observation involves married couples, this is a direct observation. Indirect observation does not involve the observer directly, either because the informant refuses to take part in the study or the direct observation is not possible. Sometimes, suppose if you want to study the marital relationship between two couples, there are certain things you can observe. There is certain degree where you will be allowed to participate. But intimate relationship between husband and wife, as a researcher, you cannot see that. You are not allowed to do that. So the limitations would be there. So there is something that you need to also understand that observation has certain strengths as a technique and certain limitations. But before you apply observation as a tool, you have to design a pilot study to certain to show the applicability of that particular technique. Because you need to have a thorough understanding of the research topic, knowledge of the peculiarities of the population. Because if other methods are possible, for other method means applying schedule or applying case studies, interviews, focus group discussion. If they are not possible, then observation becomes the best method. And then knowledge of the peculiarity of the population and how, because some aspect of a community could be very, very peculiar. So you have to understand what is the peculiarity of that situation that needs observation as a technique to be used, to be applied, and understanding of the possible problem areas of the study. And you need to have sense of problems that lies there and the familiarity with categories where appropriate and their effective use. Then introduction to ways of overcoming unexpected problems and conflicts. So you should also be very, very aware of what are the unexpected conflicts and problems that may come with observation. Because your mere presence to see things may be very uncomfortable to people. So you should be very aware of it. And then, even if you are applying observation method, you should be ethically very, very correct in the sense you need to take their consent, informed consent, to use observation as a tool. And as I said, there is one is open and another is hidden observation. Sometimes you have to deal with the ethical concerns, the moral values little differently, because ethics says you cannot and you should not collect any data without the consent or without the agreement or without the knowledge of the participant. But as a researcher, sometimes it is not doable, it is not practicable. Because if you are dealing with very sensitive issues that people may not be willing to reveal, very personal relationship, or suppose Naxalism becomes a very politically or difficult topic. And suppose if you want to understand how informers act between the common people and the Naxal active Naxals, and if you want to understand the the functioning of a, of an agent or an informer, how the informer negotiate between the police and the Naxal. This is just an example. So there will be certain things which can be open. There are certain aspects which you have to have hidden, and this is also a very risky thing. So, so this particular tool may also put you in difficulties, may put you in ethically very difficult position if you are not very clear about it and if you do not have a good understanding of the social situation. And when observation method of data collection is generally considered to have advantage, what is the context? The context or it is suitability is it provides information when other methods are not effective. As I said, other techniques like schedule, questionnaire, or case studies, interviews, focus group discussion, or PRA, RRA, all these are techniques. When all those techniques you feel that they are not effective, they cannot be applied, or they may not yield good result, then you apply observation as a method. Then it employs a relatively less complicated and less time consuming procedure of subject selection. And in other method, you have to be very, very careful about the specific research subjects or key informants or important individuals who may play important role in providing you data. But in observation, this is less complicated. You may not have to apply a lot of your mind in selecting people who would be the gamut of your study. You can just go natural. You can go whoever is available. Of course, you need to map out, you need to understand who are the key people who may give me better data. But it is less complicated than other methods or other techniques. And it can offer data when respondents are unable and unwilling to cooperate with or to offer information. As I said earlier, observation is used when your respondents are unable to do. For example, somebody is very, very old, unable to talk, small children, or people who are very sick, or people who are under the duress because of somebody's oppressive situation. They do not want to speak anything without the permission of the elder, without the permission of somebody who is more powerful, or people are not unwilling. They don't want to cooperate with you, or they don't want to give any information. So that kind of situation might also happen. When you see that, or when you realize that this kind of other kind methods of data collection is not possible. You apply observation as a method. It approaches reality to its natural structure and studies events as they evolve. So, observation is a method that neither you try to control it nor you try to temper it or change it. You have to just see or observe things as they unfold, and it offers first-hand information without relying on reports and others. So, observation is a method where you do not have to rely on other things because this is what you see firsthand. You see yourself, you observe yourself, you experience yourself. So, you do not need to corroborate with it, or you do not require to rely on reports and other things. And the next is it also allows the collection of wide range of information, even when the information is thought to be, at the time of study, irrelevant. This is particularly true of participant observation. So, participant observation, the first one that we discussed, is something where you have plethora of data that you come across. So, there may be a situation where things will unfold contrary to what exactly you want it. Maybe unexpectedly, you will have much more thick descriptions of a situation, more information than you expected. And it is also relatively inexpensive because observation is something that you just see yourself, experience yourself, and observe. Other methods would be little expensive. For example, if you apply focus group discussion, then you need to really spend a lot of time, maybe money to organize things, to invite different stakeholders for a discussion. If it is interview, maybe you need to have a interview guide or schedule or tape recorder and other things. But observation is something, this is very less expensive or inexpensive. You do not need anything. It is only through your naked eye that you see things and then link. Your ability to link social phenomena will be, of course, important. But then, even if it has a lot of strength, observation can also have some limitations. So, what are the limitations? The limitations are like it cannot be employed when large groups or extensive events are studied. Observation is something that you cannot go for large groups or very extensive study because this is something only individually can be done. Only the researcher himself or herself can do. So, if the study scope is very big and population groups are very large, the areas are extensive, and the events that is taking place that you would like to observe is too many, then it will be difficult. Something like Bali Yatra. Suppose if you compare a tribal hut or a weekly hut market and it's a Bali Yatra kind of thing. So, if the event is too big, as a researcher, as an individual, it will be very difficult for you to capture all the events taking place, all the important aspects of the social phenomena that you are interested. But if it is like a daily hut market, so actors are limited, location is also limited. So that would be within your control. And you know, in a typical, if you are studying a tribal village, normally what anthropologists do and where observation as a technique is used, number of people who interact in a typical hut or market, daily or weekly market, are also limited. And very less people are from outside. It's a controlled kind of, it's a control. Of course, it's a natural setup, but still relatively controlled. And then it cannot, second is, it cannot provide information about past, future, and unpredictable events. So observation is something that is at present. It is just now what is happening, not about the past, what happened in the past. In observation, because since you are not talking to people, you are not interacting, you are not interviewing them, it will be difficult for you to understand the past. But in contrast to this, for example, if you want to compare with case study method or interview method, you can ask your respondent if it is so like this, what it was 20 years back, 30 years back, previous generation, previous to previous generation. But in observation, you are not asking people about things, not taking their opinion, not having a comparative assessment of situation. You are just seeing things. So this is the limitation of this. And then it is inadequate when studying certain phenomena such as sexual behavior, family violence. As I said, suppose if you want to observe intimacy between partners, it will be difficult to apply observation as a method. Suppose family violence, it will be difficult to witness all those things because people would have very different norms whether to allow you to remain present or not. So it will make it difficult to observe. And it is also exposed to observers' bias, selective perception, and selective memory. And another limitation or challenge to observation as a technique is the observer's biasness or biased perspective about the particular social phenomena that he or she is interested in. If you have a biased perspective, then the understanding would be totally very difficult, very different, and it may be completely wrong because you are not getting a chance to cross check things and you are really drawing your opinion based on what you see. And then selective perception. You may have very selective perception because what one individual can see may not be it kind of 360 degree or may not be a total thing until unless you interact with people. It will be just one way traffic. Observation is a method which is just one way because this is just researchers way of looking at things. So it may be bias, it may be have a selective perception and then selective memory also. Because when you observe things and come back, narrate all those, write down all those narratives, it may be you may have selective memory of things. And again, most of the time, another drawback with this technique is always we belong to a specific culture or society, and in back of our mind we have the experience from our own community. And when we go and study an alien community or a different community or a strange community, always we have this comparative framework in mind. We always compare the studied community with our own, and in that the selective memory that we have from our own experience of living in our own community, sometimes we may use that framework, that perspective to understand the studied community. There, it becomes biased, it becomes selective, it becomes defective. And then it offers no control measures regarding bias, attitude, and opinions of the observer. So there is no control, and it cannot offer quantitative generalization of the result. In other studies, you can quantify the result, but in observation, it is just your own perception of things. It is about, and what you see cannot be quantitatively generalized, quantified. But despite all these limitations, observation is one of the most popular method of data collection employed by researchers of both quantitative and qualitative domains. And dear friends, next comes interview. Interview is something, it's a form of questioning characterized by the fact that it employs verbal questioning as its principal technique of data collection. So interviews is a common occurrence in everyday life because you you know that most of the time when we are in the field, we ask people questions. So that is what is interview. Asking questions and noting down answers or remembering answers is entering into a kind of dialogue. Dialogue between at least two people or two groups of people is interview. And then it can be structured and it can be unstructured. Structured means if you have set of questions, they are fixed, then it is close ended and you know beforehand what need to be asked. Then you set all the questions for yourself. You go meet the respondent, ask certain those specific questions. And unstructured is something that you do not have specific questions. You cannot define the purview of the question. So these are all unstructured. So structured interviews, they are based on strict procedures and highly structured interview guide. And in which case it is not different from questionnaire. So let me clarify one thing beforehand. One is schedule, another is questionnaire. You should be very clear about these two things. Questionnaire is something, it is a set of questions which is asked by the researchers only on the piece of paper or in a computer screen. But it is sent to the respondent to be filled in by the respondent, not in the presence of the researcher. The researcher is not present to guide or to monitor or to ask the questions in case of questionnaire. Questionnaire is a set of questions that is sent by post or by email or through telephonic conversation where the researcher and subjects do not meet each other and the researcher do not have control over the questions once it is sent to the respondent. And then in comparison to questionnaire, you have schedule. Schedule is again a set of questions. There are a number of questions like questionnaire, but it is filled by the researcher himself or herself. If you are a researcher, want to go and study the Santals of Mayurbhanj, if it is a questionnaire, you will frame, suppose you are sitting at Bhubaneswar, questionnaire is something, a set of questions, you print it, if suppose in one page or two pages or three pages, then you send it by post or through email or through WhatsApp, and then the respondent will download, fill up the answers, then give it back to you or send it back to you. Schedule is something you do not go to or you do not send the questionnaire, but you go yourself, meet the people, ask them the questions, and record all their answers. Either record it in your memory or in your notebook or in a tape recorder. So this is what is schedule. Schedule is something that is filled by the researcher after asking the question to the respondent. Schedule is something, sorry, questionnaire is something researcher is not present. It is sent by post. That is the difference. Anyway, come back to structured interviews. So we have structured interviews and unstructured interviews. Structured interviews is strict. This is based on strict procedure and highly structured interview guide. And in which case it is no different from questionnaire. The instrument allows no freedom to make adjustment to any of its elements, such as content, wording, or order of the question. In structured interview, you are there, but you cannot change the questions. It is close ended, it is close. You have no liberty to change. But in unstructured interview, they have no strict procedure to follow as described in structured. There are no restrictions in the wording of the questions, the order of the questions, or the interview schedule. The researcher can change in the spot. Then comes your semi-structured interviews. They are somewhere between structured and unstructured interviews. They contain elements of both. And while some are closer to structured interviews, others are closer to unstructured interviews. So semi-structured is something that you have the characteristic from both structured and unstructured. You have set of questions, but they can be changed. And then the researcher, that is the interviewer, hold a central place in research process. They have to follow the following task. So an interviewer, the person who is going to take the interview, need to keep these following points in mind. One is selecting and approaching the respondent, then arranging the time, date, duration, and condition of interview. Because in interview, you cannot just go and take interview or ask permission for interview. It is better that you have a proper plan how to take an interview. Taking interview needs a lot of pre-event planning. Study. And then you need to arrange time, date, duration, conditions of interview. Because suppose if you are going for a take a political person's interview or somebody who has less time, then you need to really fix it beforehand. And you have to tell them the conditions that I will have this many questions, it may take this many hours, this will involve this kind of questions. Some would be very personal, some would be about the community, whether you are comfortable. So all these needs to be discussed, I think, prior to the study. And then the performing the interview by following the instructions. And while doing this interview, one need to follow certain instructions. Suppose there are some schedules you might have seen which will have a lot of questions. If you are using that structured schedule for interviewing people, then you need to tell them that you need a lot of time from them. You need a lot of reflections, a lot of personal information, and it will take this much of time. And then controlling the interview situation towards reducing and eliminating resistance, suspicion, prejudice, negative forces. Because you know that in controlling the interview situation is also very important, because otherwise people might have suspicion, people may have prejudice, may have negative opinion about what you would like to do. So you need to clarify them and avoiding bias and working towards an objective. While taking interview, structured interview, you need to be very focused, you need to work as per the objective that you have set. And sometimes you may need to record the interview that you do. If it is a structured interview, you may not remember everything. And there may be a chance of error of representation of the facts. You might have seen in newspaper or television, people say, "Oh, I did not say this, but the reporter has misrepresented what I wanted to say. This is misrepresentation of the data that I have given. Or this is not my opinion." Something. It may be political, it may be true also. So that means the researcher has not really captured. So in order to avoid that, most of the time, researchers use a recorder. So you can record all the answers that accurately if you use a machine or a gadget to record things. But one thing you must always keep in mind, if you are recording, if you are recording all the conversations, then you should take prior permission. Then you should have honesty, trustworthiness, you need to be intelligent. All those characters you must have. Because if you are recording, then you should take prior consent of the respondent. You ask, check with them if he or she agrees for the recording. So that is what is going to be very, very important. Then comes the next is schedule. As I said, schedule is again a set of questions, but that is used by the researcher in the field. It is not questionnaire. Questionnaire is sent by post, schedule is used in the field. And observations, so there are different kinds of schedule. One is observation schedule or guide. Observation schedule offer opportunity for uniform classification of recording. It is just, it's a kind of objective memory tickler. Like schedule is something set of questions. It reminds you to ask these things. Then you write down there. Then you have document schedules. Document schedule means if you may have set of questions, then there are space in between the questions. You go to a library or an office or anywhere you are going for interview, you ask people about data, they would give you, but then you write down there. So that is called document schedule. Then institutional survey or evaluation schedule. Evaluation schedule is something used for to visualize the problems faced by or inherent in a given type of institution. The length of such schedule depends on aspects of study. Suppose if you want to evaluate a particular kind of project, suppose agricultural project that has been implemented, and you want to record what has been the progress. So you use a specific type of questions with some space and you ask the question and then review it. Then you have interview schedule, which is important for us. Interview schedule is something, it's a set of questions that is used to take the interview. Interview is different from interview schedule. Interview schedule is a set of questions that is applied or administered in order to take the interview, collect data. Then comes questionnaire. I have finished. Questionnaire is something which is sent by post. It is less expensive. It is again set of questions. It is questionnaire is something that produce quick results. It is sent to, suppose if you want to have a view of 100 people about certain things. So you prepare a questionnaire, you send to at least 500 people. You know that the success rate or will be very less, maybe 20%. So you send to 500 people. If 100 people respond to your request, then those 100 people become your universe of study. So questionnaire is sent by post to them. And its advantages, it is less expensive, less time consuming, and then it also offers very objective view of people. Because if you send somebody by post 10 questions to fill up, since you are not there, so the person has all the freedom to write. If his identity or her identity is not revealed in the study design, then he can write truthfully what he wants to write. Because you are not there to probe, ask further questions as it is in schedule. So this is very effective as far as quick studies design, but it has limitations. It has limitations like it does not allow probing, prompting, and clarification of question. Suppose the respondent do not understand a question, so the researcher is not there in questionnaire. So that cannot be probed. You cannot clarify the question. Whatever the respondent understand, he will answer. He will write it there. And it also do not offer opportunity for motivating the respondent to participate in the survey or to answer the question. So the respondent may just sign and send it back, may not answer all the questions. But if had it been scheduled, in schedule you may request Madam, I want answer to this question number 7 and 8. But in questionnaire, there is no chance. There is no opportunity for you to motivate the respondent. And then the order of the question. In a schedule, you can, since you are present as a researcher, so you can follow the particular pathway, particular order of the questions. But in questionnaire, the order may or may not be followed. Yes, Smriti.
Sir, can you again explain the Finnish questionnaire?
Which questionnaire you said? Questionnaire in
Finnish? Yes,
Finnish.
sir. Yes, sir.
Finnish questionnaire means? Did I say Finnish?
Sorry, sir, if I heard.
Okay, no. I said questionnaire is Finnish. If you want, no, I didn't use the word Finnish. I said questionnaire and schedule. There is a difference between questionnaire and schedule. Was it clear, or should I repeat? Questionnaire is set of questions that you send to the respondent by post. Researcher is not present. But in schedule, again, it is a set of questions. It can be close-ended, means fixed question, or it can be open-ended. You can change at the spot, but the researcher is present. And I was explaining the merits or advantage of questionnaire. Advantage it takes less time. It is less expensive because you just send it by post or by email and you don't need to go. Because if you want to go, suppose if you want to go to Mayurvansh to study, so it will be expensive for your travel, for your staying, for your food. But questionnaire is something you send it by post, people would respond and give back the response through return mail. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the next would be rapid appraisal techniques of focus group discussions. I think in your study material, I think there are only one or two, but one is rapid rural appraisal, RRA. There is also PRA, okay, participatory research appraisal. These are two things, and then the focus group discussion. So RRA is not there or PRA is not there in your book, but you must also understand. In social science research, especially research that involves intervention. What intervention means? When an agency is intervene to make the change the situation, intended to change the situation. For example, in health projects, suppose if you want to uh, make an awareness program to improve vaccination or family planning method. So you are intending to change the situation. Then you need to consult with people. You need to go map. Suppose if you want to apply an agricultural project in a village. So what you would do, you would go to the village, talk to people, understand what are their common problems and what are the solutions they think that can be to the problem and how much they can participate. So in that kind of research, it's called, it is called participatory research appraisal. So you participate, you yourself participate in the research uh, process, in the research process in order to bring the desired change or role. And rapid rural appraisal is you go to a village quickly because in anthropological research or in ethnographic research, it is very time consuming. You stay in a village, you need to stay in a village for weeks together, months together, year together in order to understand a social phenomena. But in a applied research, in an intervention oriented research, you do not have that flexibility. You do not have that much of time with you. You are not allowed months, 4 months or 1 year. Government will say, okay, you go and give me a report after 7 days or 15 days. why malaria has become pandemic, why this particular disease has affected people, or why this particular agriculture technology is not accepted by people. Tell me the reasons how it can be more effective. Then you are not giving long time, you are giving less time. So you go quickly, get the access to the village, talk to the people, have a meeting with them, understand their problem, solutions given by them. So this is mapping. So these are all rapid appraisal techniques used in social science, especially in NGO sector. Then relating to that is focus group discussion or FGD normally. So these methods are introduced by Cotwin in 1936 in USA. I think many things you can study from your study material, but let me give you the idea and the crux of what it means. So focus group discussion is something your research problem is focused. For example, if the government or a company wants to promote a specific kind of seed variety, suppose GM crop, genetically modified crop, the company wants to promote, suppose a specific kind of, suppose sugarcane cultivation. Company would say if you cultivate this sugarcane, your productivity will be 30% more than the traditional variety because this is a genetically modified seed variety. Then, in that case, your focus is the farmers who are interested for sugar cultivation. Your interest is people who would adopt genetically modified crop. Your interest is to understand people's changing perspective from traditional method of agriculture to modern method of agriculture. So that is why in focus group your problem is focused, but then participants will be diverse. Who are the participants in this sugarcane cultivation discussion? They will be farmers who are interested to do this crop. There will be company members who would try to promote this kind of cultivation. Then you would also have people from the government who would like to give this. So you would have number of stakeholders who are interested in in promotion of this particular method. So the research problem is focused, but stakeholders are different. Another kind of focus group discussion is your participants are focused. Suppose if you want to understand the success or failure of a health program, here the stakeholders are doctors, nurses, paramedical staff, government officials. But you are not interested in diverse kind of people's view. You are interested only in medical doctors. So you invite medical doctors only. So the composition of group is homogeneous. So participants are focused, issues are diverse. And in another kind of thing, issue is focused, participants or stakeholders are diverse. So focus group discussion, what is the advantage and disadvantage? The advantage is you get very diverse kind of opinions, diverse kind of, because when people of very different views will interact, they will fight among each other. They would also crisscross the answers. They would also argue with each other. From their argument, you would get new reflection. You will get better ideas about things. But again, the disadvantage of focus group discussion is in case you are unable to steer the discussion, if you are not intelligent, smart enough to steer the discussion, it may not yield good result. So your choice of respondents and then your ability to steer goal directed discussion and then the controlling the discussion will be very, very important. And again, the recording of the data while taking these discussions further will be very, very crucial. Then comes case study. I think case study is something that I discussed yesterday. Case study, as I said, case study is something study when you study the whole units in their totality, not one aspect. And as I said yesterday, case can be one individual can be a case, family can be a case, a village can be a case, a country can be a case. So case study is something when you would like to understand a social phenomena or a social problem which is minor in nature, focused in nature, but in totality from holistic point of view. That is why case study is also one of the sought after technique used by anthropologists in field research, in ethnographic research. And case study can be used both in quantitative research and also qualitative research. Then we move to secondary data. This is what is primary data. Primary data is something that is used by the researcher in the first hand, by the researcher himself or herself. Secondary source is something, secondary data is something that you do not collect yourself. You rely on somebody else's data. And what are the examples? Suppose census. Census data is something which is secondary data. All the government documents, research articles, government reports, or all these things, survey reports, gazetteers, films, manuscripts, all these are secondary source or secondary data. Census is something you must be knowing. Census is one is a national census that is done in every 10 years. But the last, unfortunately, because of COVID, the 2021 census could not be done. But census can also be, suppose you can also do a census of a village. Census means complete enumeration of the population. And census is a source of secondary data. If it is a national census, population census, that becomes major source for understanding the population change or about any data with regard to demography, fertility, mortality, migration, income, occupation, education, all these categories, all these variables for which data have been collected through census are available for analysis, are available to understand the social change that is taking place in our society. So, social scientists use census as a source of data, authentic and reliable source of data for large scale comparison or large scale understanding or even for large scale design of the study. Because if you want to study a particular population, so what is the total population of that particular caste group in that particular district or block or panchayat? So through census you would know. So census data would help you to design your study. Then comes registration system of population registers. So, so population register is something where all this handbook they collect data on the entire population of the country or the state or a particular area. Then there are sample surveys like National Sample Survey or NSS. You must be knowing this. So Indian National Sample Survey, which was started in 1950, because it also because these are all interim reports. These are based on sample. Census is total enumeration. Suppose in a village, for example, there are 100 households. In census, you go to all 100 households, you collect information about people like their age, their sex, their education, their occupation, all other information about all 100 households. You cannot leave one. You have to collect all. That is called the total universe of the study. The universe is 100 household. But in sample survey, it is done in the interim period in between. It is, as the name suggests, it is just a sample of that. You just take 5% or 10% of sample. So instead of taking 100 household, you take just 10%, 10 household. There are different ways how to select. You must have studied with the statistics class. So how to select 10 out of this 100. There is a stratified sampling, random sampling, there are different kinds of sampling. So you can do sample survey which would be representative of the universe. So you take 10 household to tell about the situation in that particular village, about 100 people. By studying, taking the sample of 10, you generalize about 100. So that is sample survey. That is also done. And then handbooks. Handbooks also provide ready reference. So many departments, government departments, publish handbooks about their organization, about their work. For example, economic anthropology, forensic anthropology, archaeological, all these handbooks are also there to get. And then gazetteers. Gazetteers is usually described as a book or a part of a book which contains a list of names of places with information about them. You must be aware of district gazetteers. In India, all the districts, suppose Odisha has 30 districts, all 30 districts will have their gazetteers. Gazetteers have been published for very, very long time, since British period. So gazetteers would provide you basic information about the topography, the climatic condition, the flora, the fauna, the population, the cultural, economic, political, all and historical, all these facts about a district or about a region. So that is also a very good source when you write your dissertation or report or any article. And gazetteers are different kinds based on kind of information they provide. Suppose World Gazetteer is a geographical dictionary or kind of index. Then short-term gazetteer, it contains list of names of places with their locations. Then long form of descriptive gazetteers, thematic gazetteers, address gazetteers. So there are different. But for you, the common thing that you must know is a district gazetteer. I would request all of you, maybe you can go to Google, just type the district gazetteer of your own district. So one, you will have a PDF version of a book, very thick book of maybe 300, 400, 500 pages or much more than that. That would define, that would give very basic information about the district. So that is also used as a major source when you write your dissertation or your thesis. Then films. Films can also be the secondary source of data for writing reports. Films about particular event. It's not film like Hindi or Odia film cinema, but films can also be documentaries. So they can also be the reservoir of social events. So that can be a source. Then different kinds of manuscripts. Manuscripts about, suppose a British period manuscripts about the flora and fauna of a particular area, or manuscripts about a particular a report about a particular community. So if you go and read them, so they can be a good source. Then you also have different kinds of documents available in government departments. So that is also very important. Then administrative reports. Administrative reports of the past period and can also be of the current. For example, somebody wants to study a village and to understand how many Indra Awas house building facilities have been given to how many people, or maybe what is the status of PDS, public distribution system in the village. So all government administrative records would have this information. Or about, for example, if you want to understand how the education scenario of this particular block or a panchayat has changed. So all administrative records will have all those historical account of the social change, the institutional change of a society. So those administrative records will of immense information. Then other kinds of sources of data that are very important for research. Then the third component is biological method. As you know, anthropology has four important branches that we discussed in the beginning. One is social and cultural anthropology that wants to study human and his society from cultural and social point of view. It intends to study social institutions like economic organization, political organization, social organization. Similarly, the second branch is biological anthropology or physical anthropology, which wants to study anthropology or human beings as an animal. Social as man as a social being. Physical anthropology tries to understand man as a biological or physical being. So it intends to understand the evolution of man as well as variation of man. So while understanding this, for example, variation, how people vary, how people differ from each other based on their physical features. So that also requires a number of tools and techniques. As in social research, we discussed. So in physical, understanding man as a physical being, you also need a different set of research tools and techniques. So, what are they? We will discuss. And the third branch is archaeological anthropology or prehistoric archaeology, because that is also a very important branch of anthropology, which tries to understand man and his society that was existing before history in the prehistoric period where there was no written records. So how do you know the society that was existing? Because there was no photographs, there's no recording, nothing. So how do you know? Because we reconstruct the society based on the artifacts. The artifacts could be stone, made up of stone, bone, or maybe some imprints in the cave or the cave arts or bone fragments. So these are the items which has been preserved in the nature or the fossil remains can be taken as evidence to reconstruct the kind of society that was existing before history, before written records are available. So, and the fourth is linguistic anthropology or language, because human beings are the only animal who have elaborate language, codified language, which can be transmitted from one to the other, which can be used as verbal, as symbols, as scripts to communicate between people close by and also far away. So, language also explains the human evolution and also variation, because language varies. As we say, in every 20 miles, the language varies, the dialect varies. So, that is also an important tool to understand human diversity and human variation, and also human evolution, how people have evolved. So, that is why all these four branches, sociocultural, biological or physical, prehistoric archaeology, and linguistic are important. But here in this paper, we will again discuss biological methods and archaeological methods. We'll take just 10 minutes more, 10-15 minutes to discuss. In biological anthropology, one is anthropometry. Anthropo means man, metry means measurement. When we go for understanding human diversity, then we use anthropometric measurements. Anthropometry, anthropometry. So just a minute. Sorry, I just take just 1 minute break. So this is about anthropometry. Means anthropo means man, metry means measurement. So why do we go for anthropometry in physical anthropology? Is to measure people in order to understand variation. You must have studied about racial classification because we have divided human populations or entire mankind into different groups based on their physical features. For example, to all the global human population, world population into three major groups: Caucasians, Mongoloids, and Negroids. What do they mean? They mean based on physical features, the bodily features, people throughout the world have been divided into different groups. So, how that is done? That is done through some kinds of measurements. And these measurements, physical anthropologists use as a tool to measure both for living as well as dead. That is called, if it is for living, it will be somatometry. Soma means body, metry means measurement, measuring the body of the living being. Then cephalometry, measurement of head and face of living, and the cadaver means non-living, the dead. And in dead, like somatometry, you also have osteometry and craniometry. Osteometry is measurement of skeletons or bones. Craniometry is measurement of skull. So anthropologists work both on dead and living. Living in order to find out the differences between human beings based on their physical features, and did on to again understand the diversity between the past people, and also for forensic understanding, for collecting evidences from bone for legal or legal jurisprudence. And then the instruments are also different. You must have done it. If you have done the practical, I do not know, then you have number of instruments that anthropologists use, like weighing machine or weighing scale for weight measurement, then anthropometer for measuring the height, skin fold caliper to measure the fat deposition in the body, then spreading and sliding caliper for measuring the length from different landmarks of both living and non-living. For example, sitting height, standing height, height of the hand or length of the hand, length of the finger, length between the forehead or different landmarks of both living and non-living. So sliding and spreading caliper. Then tape, body volumes, then all this. Similarly, for dead bodies or for bones, similarly, radiographic instruments, X-rays, scanners, all those things are also used by anthropologists. And these are all done for human body physical differences, body physic or physical measurements and classification. Second is pedigree analysis. Like in social anthropology, we study family tree. Similarly, in physical anthropology, people use pedigree. Pedigree is just like a family tree, and this is a very classical method used in human genetics in order to map the family line, to understand how genetic disorders, because that is linked to population genetics, how disease conditions that are inheritable in nature, pass from one generation to other. You might have less, listened to the example of hemophilia as a disease, which was very common in the British royal family. Like, if there is any wound, blood will not clot. Blood passing of blood will not stop. That was a genetic disorder which was very common in the royal family of Britain. Since they practice endogamy, marry between the family members, skin groups, close skin blood relatives, so that disease was there. So for this kind of disease or of disease of Mendelian characters, a Mendelian disease, pedigree becomes important method of study. In that, in your book, in a box that is given, male will be square kind of thing, female will be round, sex unspecified would be rectangular kind of thing. Then all these relationship, please go through that because that is also pedigree study. Pedigree study or genealogy, as it is called in social anthropology, is one of the common methods, classical methods used by physical anthropologists to study population genetics, especially Mendelian diseases. Because both X chromosome and Y chromosome, they pass from one generation to other generation in a typical fashion. That typical fashion, as explained by Mendelian law, can be understood by drawing pedigree. So if you understand or if you know how to make a pedigree of a particular of a family, then it will be easier to understand how the disease condition passed from one generation to other. You may go to a village, find out a blind person or a person having thalassemia or sickle cell anemia or G6PD or any kind of disorder. So you wonder why it has happened. The person may be just cursing herself or himself that, okay, I am so unfortunate. No, it is not because of unfortunate, but because since this disease is of a genetic in nature, it has been transmitted from the parents, and the parents have got this disease from their parents, grandparents, grandparents. So once you understand how to draw a pedigree, you can predict the transmission of the disease, the probable passing of the disease from one generation to other. Then one would ask, what is the utility of this drawing pedigree or applying this technique? It has some application. What is that? It is if you can properly predict the pathway, how disease transmit from one generation to other, you can take preventive measures. Genetic disorders as such, for which you do not have curative measures. Cure is, for most of the diseases, cure is not available. You can prevent them. How you can prevent? You can prevent by giving them marriage counseling, providing them counseling, premarital counseling. Before marriage, you say that, okay, if you have this sickle cell anemia, as per Mendelian rule, you carry 25% chance to pass on the defective gene to the next generation. If you can avoid marrying one carrier, then you can avoid the disease. Carrier in the sense, for a disease, there are three conditions as per Mendel. One, sufferer of the disease who have at least two similar kind of recessive gene. Then you have another extreme, you have two dominant gene who are normal. Then in the middle, you have one normal, one abnormal, or one dominant, one recessive. Recessive is the causal factor for the disease. So if you have a defective one dominant, one recessive, so there is a 25% chance that that recessive gene would get expressed if it is comes with combination of another recessive gene. So if you provide marriage counseling, people would understand, they would avoid marrying another carrier. So for preventive measures, this kind of method is useful. Then comes anatomical method. Anatomical method is something that you take measurement of different bodily parts by understanding their landmarks. Then comes serogenetics. Sero means blood, genetics is study of inheritance. By taking blood drawing blood, you can understand population genetics. People are interested in understanding. Anthropologists traditionally used to do, when biological anthropology used to be called as physical anthropology, because when people were interested in humans as physical being, in understanding the phenotypic or bodily figures. But later on, when genetic science grew, developed, people realized that the differences, human diversity, not only lies in a phenotypic or bodily features, but also what is inside the body or the genotypic at the level of blood or the level of serum. So, blood group studies grew in anthropology, physical anthropology became biological anthropology, because biological anthropology intends to understand the biological system, systemic understanding of human. So, in that, people went to blood, to serum, to uh, protein, and all different kinds of, now DNA and genome studies are become important. Then some people are also, anthropologists are also interested in understanding different blood group system, like ABO blood group, MNS, RH, MN system, Diego, D, Phi, Kel, Duffy. These are all blood group systems. We know only ABO blood group system, like we say, I am B positive or B negative or O group, AB group, or something like that. This comes under ABO. But within our body, there are many different kinds of blood group systems like MNS, and which are linked to specific kind of diseases or uh, different kinds of inheritable characters, not diseases but inheritable characters. So anthropologists are interested in understanding all these differences that lies genotypically within our body, that we cannot see through naked eye. I can see your hair color, hair texture, nose form, eye form, epicanthic fold, structure of your face, skin color. These are all phenotypic characters. But I cannot, by seeing you, I cannot say what kind of blood group you have, what kind of disease you have. I cannot say that. These are all genotypic. That is in my gene, not in my body or fit phenotypic. So anthropologists earlier were interested in phenotypic, but later on they became interested in genotypic, for which there are number of tools and techniques available, and this is what we have discussed. And then coming to the last part, very quickly, about the archaeological methods. Archaeology is, as I said, anthropologists are also interested not in the contemporary or the present human beings, they are also interested in understanding the human beings as they lived in the past, very, very past, before history, before written records were available. So then the clue how to understand people and their society who were living 3,000, 5,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 5 lakh years back. How to know that? You may have worked. Suppose if you want to see your brother's marriage, even your parents' marriage, if they have a video recording, you can go and play it and see how your parents looked when they were young, how your brother looked, your sister looked when they got married 10 years, 15 years, 30 years back. But if you want to know who were your grandparents 25 generation, 50 generation, 100 generation, 1000 generation back, how do you know? We do not know. So there are number of methods available with biological anthropology. For example, mapping through your gene, genomic study, genomic diversity study, or fossil study, or study of bones and stone tools of different periods like Mesolithic, Paleolithic, Neolithic period, suggests that there was a gradual evolution of man, his society, as well as the technology that he used. All those artifacts help us to reconstruct our history. Then, how to understand that? That becomes a question. And archaeological anthropologists also apply certain tools and techniques in order to do that. What they do? They dig. They also go for surface collection of stone tools, hand axe, scrapers, micro tools to understand the kind of technology that was existing. For example, hand axe was used when people were practicing only very raw form of hunting. But as they went on forming a group, hunting bigger animals from a distance, they used sharp stones, small stones with the help of a bow and arrow. So the technology changed. And later on in Neolithic period, they suppose when they started agriculture or horticulture or animal husbandry. So they wanted to clear the forest. They need to cut the tree. So they needed some sharp items to do that. The use of metals, from stone to metals. All these things have changed. So how do they know that? They go for exploration. Exploration of stone tools, bone tools, or different kinds of fossils in the surface. Then excavation. Excavation is something you dig the soil in order to excavate to find out different kinds of tools and artifacts used by the prehistoric man. Then they go for field working, aerial photography, then magnetometer survey, electrical resistivity survey in order to understand what kind of tools are available at any point, geography or under the soil. Probing, then remote sensing, also modern method to use uncover archaeological data to understand GPS system like ground penetrating radar to understand the tools that is lying under the soil. And in exploration they apply a number of methods that is given in your book that you can go through. Excavation is like they would dig the soil to lay out a trench. Then they will find out some artifacts made up of bones and stones, and the burial grounds becomes another tool. So this is how they will find out number of, for example, potteries. Let me give small example from what we have done in our department. Our department of anthropology at Utkal University, we have excavated one site, a place called Harirajpur, which is around 35 kilometers from Bani Vihar or Bhubaneswar city. We have excavated one site, one mound, small hill kind of thing. And after digging for about 10 15 meter, we found skeleton. The skeleton belonged to the early Neolithic period of Odisha, early agricultural community. So the complete bone of male and female, and near that burial ground, the place where they were buried, the dead body was buried. There were a lot of potteries and many necklace and metal items were also discovered. And these potteries of very different kinds of structure. And then from the pit, and we found different designs, the house designs or architecture. The the whole houses were not there, but imprint of that. So that tells us about the kind of society that was existing 5,500 years back. The house pattern, and the bodily structure of the people from the skeleton. One interesting fact we found that the skeleton had a broken arm and then it was jointed. So that means bone setting as it is practiced now, जो हाड़भंगा ଆମେ କହୁଛେ ହାଡ଼ଭଙ୍ଗାକୁ ଯୋଡ଼ିବା. So that technology was also known to people of that particular time. That means ethnomedical knowledge, how to set the bone once it is broken. was also known to those people. So, how do we know? We know from the skeletal evidence that we discovered. And what else we knew? We, we saw that the male members, their feet has been chopped. ତାଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ ପାଦଟା ସେଟାକୁ ହଣା ହେଇଯାଇଛି, କଟା ହେଇଯାଇଛି. So why it is so? And there are other studies from other parts of India, for example, Inamgaon in Maharashtra, which also shows similar kind of evidence that shows male members or members who are, suppose, key figures, the village headman. His feet used to be chopped so that the spirit cannot come back. Maybe this is how people interpret. We do not know exactly what would be the reason, but experts who work on this kind of skeletal remains and material remains like potteries and other artifacts, metal artifacts, interpret like this. So that helps us to understand the human society in the past. So, so they use different methods like exploration, excavation, and other kinds of methods. So this is what briefly is about different kinds of tools, techniques, and methods used in anthropology. Especially, we started with. Let me briefly conclude. We started with social and cultural data collection that used observation, case study, interviews, focus group discussion, RRA, PRA as techniques for data collection of cultural and social or economic in nature. Then we studied physical anthropology methods or techniques like anthropometric, craniometric, somatometric study by using weighing machine, anthropometric rod, sliding caliper, spreading caliper, craniophore, and many other instruments to understand human bodily features or differences, measurements. Then serological or blood related by studying, by taking different blood group classifications that would help to understand the genotypic differences. Then we also discussed about pedigree as a tool used by physical anthropologists to understand the inheritance pattern of genetic disorders. Then finally, we studied prehistoric archaeology, how prehistoric archaeologists or archaeological anthropologists use exploration and excavation as a technique to dig out data like bone, stone, potteries, and all different kinds of metals to reconstruct human life in the prehistoric period and the before history. So these are the common techniques used by anthropologists in order to understand the common thing, that is to understand man or human, that includes both man and women and their society culture as it existed in the past and it is existing now. So thank you very much. We still have 5 minutes. If you have any queries, questions, please. If you do not have questions, I will log off. Thank you very much. And if you have
Thank you,
questions,
sir.
okay, okay, thank you.